Yeah, sweet look of the place, by the way.
Thank
I will
you.
say, yeah, it's cool to see. I think that's okay. So we can get started there actually with what people. So a lot of people like to ask me about the Kentucky Bourbon Trail and like different places to go. So for the first part of this, I'd love to talk about like why somebody would come here, what you're going to experience when you come here. I mean, obviously you've shown me some of the stuff that you're going to see when you come here, but if I'm planning a trip to the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, the first thing is I can walk in off the street and go to your guys' bar and check that stuff out.
Yep.
If I want to do a tour here, what should I plan ahead for, and then what am I going to see like while I'm here?
So we're open pretty much Monday through Sunday. So I think right now we have holiday hours, so it's like 1 to 8.
Okay.
So, but during that time, there's a tour guide here. There's somebody here that could take you through our barrel pick experience. There's, walk-in tours, but we also take scheduled tours. So, some people have their stuff scheduled and then they hang out at the bar and grab cocktails before or after. Some people just walk in and, as long as we're open, we open the doors and say, hey, how are you trying to experience what we do? Or, are you thirsty? It's just kind of come in, hang out. And some people want to go taste through some barrels and we'll let them thieve out of the barrel, take a bottle with them. Other people want to hear about, our story, how we got here, hang out, have a cocktail, taste through some of our distillate with the clear spirits, and then taste through, NULU, what we do day in and day out now, and taste some of our bourbons and just kind of see what's up. We're different, right?
Yeah.
Why would you come here? You're coming to see a family-owned business versus a behemoth with, huge fermenters, and they're showing you their still that's running while you're doing it. We have 2 stills back there, but they're not running. We don't need to run them, thankfully. We source, and kind of like what we did, we just taste through the truckload of barrels. And but yeah, when you come here, you can, whatever you want to do, we're happy to cater to your needs.
Yeah. And I think let's talk about the sourcing for a second, because I think I've said multiple times on the show that it's so helpful to be able to taste distillate and do the fine tuning after it's been aged, or as it's aging, you're able to do the fine tuning. It's not, way back in the day, it was like, let's throw something in a barrel and see what comes out in 10 years.
Right.
but now you can do some fine tuning. And I got to see that process a little bit, which was very cool. So when you guys get your barrels in, what's first going through your head? You've got, you're sourcing your barrels. A shipment comes in like we saw today. What's your process? What are you guys doing?
So initially we have to taste it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If we're bringing in, we're tight on space. So for our perspective, it's like, what can we fit in that warehouse that's full? And if we're going to use up that, much needed warehouse space, it better be something we can taste. And if it's good, we can try to market it and find a partner for it to sell it. But really we're just going through trying to find what tastes good.
Okay.
From there, it's, do we want to keep it? Or do we want to sell it or let it age? Or, we are a business, so we do need to sell some whiskey. But, sometimes you come across a barrel that's so unique, I put my name on it and it's like I own it. Or, we have other employees in the past that are like, I want that barrel, and we'll just hold on to it and figure it out. It's not super often, but usually you're looking for good ones. And then from there, as long as it's still straight bourbon, it's in a barrel, it's earning value. If it's in its original barrel or if it's rebarreled, in our opinion, putting it in a new toasted and charred barrel, typically American oak, you're still straight bourbon. Now you're double oaked, if you will, or a toasted product, but it's aging and you give it new life. And, say you rebarrel it at 4, now you have 2 years later, really, really rich 6-year.
Right.
So now that we have that kind of time behind us and that data, 12, 18-month, 24-month double oaked whiskey, it's pretty good. It's dark as hell. It's so surprising to see. So it's cool to have that experience behind us now. And
definitely.
So as we move forward, like as we buy 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 6-year, whatever we're buying, the mindset's find the good ones. And that's what we use to blend straight bourbon or to, make a base batch and then toast or whatever we need, because it all has to be good. But the ones that aren't as good or need some love, we're figuring out what char levels they need, what toast level it needs, and we can rebarrel it and revisit in a year or 2, so our next step's getting more warehouse space so we can do that.
Yeah. Are there any that stand out to you that did a full 180 when you tried it and you're like, we can't sell this right away, and rebarreled it?
Yeah, so our first double oaked, the way they came about was you see that barrel over there, and we were bottling, still hand bottling at the time in the back there. And it was like, yeah, you mean that rusty barrel that sucks? It's B24 was the barrel number. So I was like, you know how you fix that? They're like, how? I'm like, you send it to Toast Hell. So we bought a heavy, it was a medium plus toast char 1 barrel from Kelvin, threw it in there. We tasted it like 2 months later, and we were like, oh my gosh, like the rust flavor is gone. Like you couldn't even tell. It was like a completely different whiskey just in 2-3 months.
Jeez.
So after that, we were like, how fast can we get a hold of these barrels, find the ones that suck, and then rebarrel them, and just see if we can't fix them with new oak. Because once you pull them out of that new charred oak, now you don't have straight bourbon. So now you have this mutant.
Right.
So you can't really market it as straight bourbon. The TTB won't let you bottle it as straight bourbon. It's now not, what's held so sacred in our country, which is, the strenuous, strict laws behind bourbon. So that's kind of where our mindset is now, is just trying to find the good stuff that's in, there's plenty of good whiskey that comes out of MGP, Beam, Wilderness Trail, Barton, everyone has good whiskey, but everyone also has whiskey that needs more time.
Yeah.
So you kind of just figure out if you can shorten the time. I mean, look at Old Forester, like we talked about, heat cycling and, using really well coopered barrels and stuff like that. So that's kind of the mindset we're in now when we bring in some barrels.
Yeah. So sometimes it's like it comes in and you think I can blend this and it's going to be the finished product, but sometimes it just needs a little bit more love, basically.
Absolutely. The older you bring in, the easier of a day you're going to have, because sometimes the day looks really rough. You might be tasting through 48 6-years, and they're corny and they're not good, but you say let her rip and you dump 15 of them together and you're like, what? Those 15 turds made an amazing bourbon. So you went from having, 15 individually bad barrels, but now you have, what is that, like 600 or so gallons of good bourbon, hopefully. Yeah. So, that's kind of where we're at. You just try to figure out what you can do with it, or give it new oak, and if you have the space, just let it age. Eventually it's going to get hot and get in the wood and get out of the wood, and unless the wood's just bad. Some barrels, those like farm tasting barrels, which I kind of love, but there's all these different flavors that every individual oak barrel can give. So time will tell. New barrels will fix it.
Yeah. Hey, fair enough. And what about the experience here? I guess I would say you can kind of experience the differences in the 4 barrels you guys have up there that you can taste through for the bottling experience.
Yeah.
So what were the 4 again? Remind me.
So we wanted to showcase a straight bourbon.
Okay.
So there's a high rye MGP that's just a few months under 7 years old, and then there's a sister or a similar barrel, same mash bill, but it's been double oaked for about a year, and it's still in that double oak barrel up there. So you can see the straight bourbon's good, right? We didn't want to rebarrel it, so it's great. It was one of those ones that has my name on it. I wanted to keep it, but we got some more 36%, so I'm like, single barrel experience. So from there, the one next to it's an infinity barrel, so it's kind of off the wall. It's an toasted rye barrel that has tons of bourbon in it. I mean, just bits and pieces of hundreds of barrels. Anything from those little sample bottles you saw, the little half pints, to a Glencairn's, like a pour's worth. So that thing's just a compilation. I think it's been in the warehouse in that barrel since October 2021.
Really?
So it's been double oaking and blending for over 2 years. So kind of just a weird, that's the mutant.
Yeah.
So, but you get to taste that, and it's really fruity and weird. And then the one next to that's the double oaked high rye. It's 7 years old or close to it. And so you get to see something that wasn't perfect and how a year in new oak has changed it completely.
Yeah.
And then there's an Amburana cask, because that's the hot new thing, and it's pretty good.
Yeah. I tried that at the Kentucky Bourbon Festival, and there was a few different ones there this year, and I think I really enjoy the profile of it. I know some people think it's strong, and it is. It comes on quick,
especially if it's overdone.
I was just gonna say, as we talked about, if you were to leave it in there too long, then you can really have an aggressive flavor.
Yeah, it's like licking a piece of wood. I mean, it's just it'll go sideways on you. But some barrels, like the heat, Amburana is great for mitigating heat, but at a certain point, it's it's not oak. It's not going to cover youth over the span of years,
right?
Like oak does. So
yeah,
I think everyone's just figuring out the parameters of the Amburana, and it's its magic powers to make Cinnamon Toast Crunch bourbon.
Right. Literally, that's exactly what the bottle tasted like at KBF. I remember that. So those 4 barrels up there, then you can thieve out of it a bottle if you so choose.
Yeah. So what's included in the experience? I think we charge like $150, and one of 2 people will curate your tasting, kind of talk you through and explain all the different projects we have that you're tasting through. So you taste straight out of the barrel. So what's cool is you're tasting them right then, right there. Mm-hmm. And if, say, barrel A out of the 4 is drinking great that day, people might be thieving bottles out of it that day. But some people might be picking barrel 3, or, that's what's cool is you kind of get to do a barrel pick without, buying a full $15,000 barrel.
Right.
So for $150, you taste through all 4, you get to hang out and check them out, and then you thieve a bottle out of whichever one, and we send you home with a rocks glass with the NULU logo that says the single barrel experience. So you do get like a little, gift bag to go with your bottle, and then you can buy bottles at regular retail out of the barrels too. So those are only available here.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Out of those same barrels?
Yeah, so like we'll charge you whatever regular retail price is. I think like Ambron is like 100 or 110, and
okay.
Like I was telling you, that guy took that as his bottle, and he said, "Can I get an extra case? Like my friends at home need this." And sure, so they sat there and thieved 6 bottles out, waxed them with them, put the labels on by hand and stuff. So
that's super cool.
That's not an experience you can really get everywhere.
Yeah.
Bottle it here, hang out, taste it. But so we wanted to offer that. It's not the cheapest thing in the world, but it's something you can't do at every distillery.
For sure. It's a unique experience, and I think like it's kind of got a laid back vibe. It's not so at least what I've seen so far. It's not so much like herding folks like cattle. It's more like, hey, hang out and have a glass and try this stuff, and that's been very cool. And speaking of your experience, there's other stuff which is behind me at the moment that they can't see on the camera that I took some videos of so people will be able to see it. But walk me through what's going on with these displays back here.
So these walls kind of just have information on them, and they're strategically placed at this point, because when we first set up these walls, it was just in 2016. We were still distilling vodka, gin, and rum. We didn't have any bourbon. We were a failing business.
Remind me, I want to come back to that. Let's talk about that. Yeah.
So now when you come in, we take you through just your regular tour is going to be information on Prohibition, and then how we tie into Prohibition, and then where we fit in the industry now.
Okay.
So we kind of tell you, NASCAR is how, back in Prohibition, NASCAR is how moonshining was, that's how he got it around, Harrison, our master distiller, one of his like keg rigged stills is on the tour. We show you kind of our weird grassroots that are now we're established, and we found our spot in the industry where we fit in. But there for the longest time, it was like, we just talked about Prohibition and how it tied into distillation, and because we had gotten raided, right? So
yeah. So let's talk about that. You guys experienced what people experienced in the beginning of Prohibition a little bit.
Yeah. So due to unfortunate circumstances that are now fortunate, Harrison and his old business partner, this was Derby City Spirits before it was Prohibition Craft Spirits.
Okay.
So Derby City was Harrison and his business partner, Jay. Jay's real name was Ben. He was a con man, sold like 240% of the DSP to investors, and just numerous things. He took like, I think 11 wedding venue deposits, like $5,000 each, and just like kept the cash, like $55,000. And so we had to have like weddings here for free. Because
he ran with the money.
Yeah, so my dad stepped in and bought the assets and liabilities of the company in 2016 with the new company, Prohibition Craft Spirits.
Okay.
Blank slate, no ABC raid charge, no moonshining charges. So, which that was to touch on that briefly. Like 2015, they Derby City Spirits had gotten their it was the rum and tequila into Forecastle Fest, and then they were on the shelves at Liquor Barn.
Okay.
And so everything looked great, right? We're in a big chain. We're in a music festival, and all the products sold out in the 3-day festival. And a few weeks later, ABC shows up at Liquor Barn and rips the product off the shelves and says to destroy it. ABC simultaneously is showing up here, and they made Harrison dismantle his still and dump out over 2,000 gallons of booze.
Oh, my gosh.
So they let him keep 1 barrel tequila. It's in an early times barrel, and I want to say it's like I think he filled it in like 2015, so it's getting old. It's like
Yeah.
8-year tequila. But yeah, so that's the raid. There's still some evidence tags on the big blending vats.
Yeah.
There's those little red, and there's some evidence tags on the on that old tequila barrel. But
Okay.
yeah, man.
And that was just because one certification was missed, right? Or one permit.
Yeah, it was the certificate of occupancy, which basically all that means is you jump through the paperwork of the government to have them say this is zoned properly.
Okay.
So it can be a distillery. So they have their federal, I want to say their state, but they didn't have their certificate of occupancy, which means their DSP was not active and established in local government. So Metro was who popped them, I believe.
Oh, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of paperwork.
Yeah, I imagine. I can't even. That is something about the industry that just stresses me out, is understanding all that. And,
yeah, there's plenty of attorneys, but they're 300 minimum. Like the attorney we were using was like 600 an hour, and then their associate was like 400. So it's like $1,000 an hour just to be in the room with them.
Oh my gosh!
So expensive oxygen, I guess. But
Yeah.
no, they're really helpful when you need help. But
right.
Once you figure out, like my brother takes care of all of our compliance and label registration. It's nice to have like pretty much a mediocre attorney in the family. Like he knows enough to be dangerous. It's awesome. So, we need new labels. He gets them approved. If we're setting up a new state, he kind of does all that and, keeps up with all the licenses. Now that we're in over 30 states, one lapse here and there and you got to fix it. But
so you guys take over in 2016, right?
Yep.
And you changed the name to Prohibition Craft Spirits, but then the name that a lot of bourbon drinkers will know you guys by is the NULU label, the NULU brand.
Yep.
So how did we get from A to B? I know you've told me a little bit about this,
Sure.
but for those listening.
Yeah, so NULU was a trademark that initially Derby City Spirits had. That was their tequila.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yep, so those two bottles right there, the Reposado and Añejo 92.
Okay.
So those are the initial NULUs. So those were released, I want to say 2018. They sold the best out of the clears, which isn't saying much, but it was good tequila. Now we sell it here like frequently. Like people actually will even text me. They'll be like, "Where can I get more Añejo?" I'm like, we're down to like 40 cases.
Yeah.
So we bottled up a bunch of it, and it didn't do well, but. We got to the point to where it was like my dad was out of money. We're on hands and knees praying, like, what do we do? We like this building we're in. We now own this building, but we owed over $250,000 in rent at one point.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, when your rent's like $13,000 a month and you miss it for like a year plus, it's like, oh no.
Yeah,
we'll give you $13,000. And it's like, well, that's 1 month. I'll see you in 30 days. So
yeah.
Luckily we came to an agreement, purchased the building. The owner has been super awesome, or the old owner now. They also facilitated buying where we bottle across the street now as well.
Okay.
But yeah, man, so you go through the mess. And
so then what made the change to bourbon? Like how did we?
So we're basically out of money. Couldn't get any more credit, and we took a PayPal loan. It was the last place we could get money. Since we already had the NULU artwork, the trademark in the spirits industry, we made NULU Bourbon. So it's not up here, but the single barrel bourbon label, we still bottle single barrel to this day. That label, we bottled up a barrel for the gift shop, and then we bottled up a barrel for Louisville Bourbon Club. They were our first release.
Cool.
So we were like, well, we'll see if people will buy 2 bottles. Like, we'll pick a barrel out of those first 20 that we bought with the PayPal loan.
Yeah.
And it was nuts, man. It was so surreal from being a failing business to like in the midst of COVID too. We got those barrels February 14th, 2020. We didn't release the first one till March, but it was nuts. People were locked down at that point, but people were still lining up at our door for our first ever barrel.
Dude.
So it was like 100-something people came through, and we're like, my dad called me. He's like, dude, like 100-something people bought bottles today. I'm like, yeah, bourbon's awesome. People love it, and it's good, and it was good bourbon.
Yeah.
And so from there, it was like those first 20, we bought 12 more, and that was with cash that we had from selling them. We were actually like being a business. We were
reinvesting.
So, you start buying 12 more, and then we called the broker. We're like, can we get 10? And they were like, man, the pallets have 4 on them. Can you buy 12? We're like, man, we're so poor. and like just in comparison, but now it's, it's so different. You're buying, 50, 100, 200 at a time. And, which we're absolutely grateful for. It's really cool. Like you saw, like now, sure, it's work a little bit. You got to taste and spit, but like, I'm so whiskey spoiled. Like I get to try all these things. That 9-year, now I have, now we have tons of 9-year that's 130-ish proof MGP.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I would drink that. Like 4 years ago, me would have been like, oh, 9-year almost hazmat MGP, dope. Like,
yeah,
I'd buy bottles.
Yeah, so. I mean, we tried a few different barrels, and they had such a spread too. Like that's what's really cool is you guys are to the point now. You're diversifying what you have. You got all these finishes, obviously, and so you got a pretty decent difference. When you're blending together, how does that work? How does that go through your head? Or is it kind of like, let's throw A and B and see what C tastes like? How does that go?
Yeah, so that's such a loaded question just because I try to like learn from, I've tried to ask people that like when I'm on a pick at Four Roses or, so to like, as we've grown, the first batch was 3 barrels. I think it took 15 minutes to pick which barrels went in it because there was only, less than 20 to choose from. So it's like, let's take these 3 scraps. And it was like, oh, it's not bad.
Right.
And then the batch 2 we probably had 40 or 50. So that was a 5 or 6 barrel batch. Got watered down to 101. The finish was really short, but it was good and fruity and wasn't hot. So we were like, cool, that's an A+ for us.
Right. It's
funny to drink old blends you've made, but
oh, I bet.
So now to this point, like we're blending in those 750 gallon vats. So you can fit about 17, 18, if they're short barrels, 20 barrels in there, which we've had 20 in there. But so really, like you said, like, is it just throw it together and see? The bigger the batch, man, it's so much easier. Like dialing in like a 6 barrel batch versus like just dump. We got 48 of them, just dump them. Like,
right.
We've legit just dumped 20 in one and 20 in the other and been like, wow, that's pretty good.
It worked out.
I mean, it's on shelves somewhere and it's sold,
right.
Like, so the thing always comes back to like our tasting team.
Yeah.
We may be drinking or not that day, and it's like, someone's dicking around. It's like, just dump them. Like, don't even taste them. And we try not to do that. We haven't done that, but it's like almost like sometimes you wish you would have. Yeah. Because you can put so much time and energy, but even if you do like a small sample, like 10 milliliters of each barrel and get a sample size, that full scale is usually different, and it's usually better. So now we're just to the point to where, we keep the 3 core bourbons around, the reserve, the toasted, and the French oak. So we kind of just keep a vat of about 6-year MGP going at all times, just to where we can either throw it in toasted barrels or hit it with French oak staves or just sell it as straight reserve,
Okay, I gotcha. Yeah, that French oak, I'm a sucker for French oak. Like anything, that stuff's nice. Yeah,
for
sure.
Thank you.
Of course, yeah. I also wanted to ask about the NULU name because I didn't know this until like semi-recently. So where did it come from? It's not just the label,
right?
But let's talk about that.
So NULU is short for New Louisville. It's a part of the city right before Whiskey Row on Market. That's like cool, hip. There's it's been gentrified. There's a lot of business there. There's anything from outdoor pizza and breweries to, we're a couple blocks away. Rabbit Hole is right in there. And, so there's a lot of stuff to do just within this kind of like mile radius. You're right by Whiskey Row. There's bars, restaurants, like some of the, 4 a.m. bars are down there. So it's just like a cool hip part of town.
Yeah. Okay.
And so like I told you earlier, we don't have Grandpa's recipe, but we have this cool bar that's, a pre-Prohibition, like 1880s built bar. And then, so we kind of just wanted to tie everything into the neighborhood. So,
okay.
So right here, you're on the outskirts of NULU, which is a half mile that way. So you're in NULU, basically. You're a walk away. So Phoenix Hill was the name of our vodka. Phoenix Hill's another, stone's throw away. It's another little neighborhood area around here. Highlands Gin is the name of our gin. Just up Bardstown Road is like considered the Highlands. So the bars kind of start 2 blocks down.
Okay.
And then we had Baxter's Rum, which has that pig on it. We're kind of near Butchertown. This is Baxter Avenue. So that we thought it was like, oh, this is great. This is telling the Louisville, little neighborhood stories. And, no one wanted our rum. No one wanted our vodka.
Bourbon just exploded.
Yeah. So it was, my dad was like, well, what should we call it? I was like, dude, just get me something that looks decent. Like, it'll taste good. That's all that matters. And he just, like, it was bizarre to him. He's like, really, the flavor's that important? I'm like, yes.
Yeah.
Bourbon has, like, I got into bourbon in 2019 and started tasting stuff. And then people are paying secondary for this stuff, and you might try it at a buddy's, or maybe you spent $300 on a bottle of Weller, and you were like, damn, that's not worth $300.
Right.
Or maybe you thought it was worth $500. You know, everybody's different, but
Very true.
for me, I was like, man, if we could be on the shelf at $60 and make it taste $80 good, we could probably have a successful business. And now it's, you know, that's what we strive for. Just make it taste better than it costs.
I put something in my eye.
Oh no, like a piece of barrel or something.
Maybe. Dude, this is a tangent, but one time I was doing a blind tasting, and I nosed and set the Glencairn down just perfectly to where it did the
yes,
right into my eye. Dude,
it burns so bad.
Oh my gosh, it was
so bad.
It was so bad. That's a tangent, but
I can definitely relate. That's happened at work a time or two.
it's like the weirdest once in a lifetime, well, not a lifetime, I guess, once a year where you'll set something down, a drink, and it hits me. Anyhow,
But just to have, like, especially if it's barrel proof on the eye.
oh my
like,
gosh.
It burns until you're like, am I getting a buzz from this? Or?
Yeah, am I going to die or get a buzz or what's going to happen? No, but you're totally right about like focusing on the quality there. And I think that that's super, like I kind of want to bring it back to, like I mentioned in the beginning, it's something that's indicative of, or not indicative, it's a result of this ability to source. And that's what I love about it, is that you can really fine tune those flavors. Like you mentioned, you can say, this isn't ready yet. Whereas if you mentioned the money stuff. I appreciate your transparency with that, because let's say that you had to buy this place, distill bourbon, sit on it for 5 years, and then sell it. Are you going to be tasting a barrel and saying that needs to sit for 2 more years? No. No. That barrel's going into a bottle.
You know, salespeople are hired to sell, you know, just like distillers are hired to distill.
Yeah.
Whether either of them are good at their job, who knows? You know who I know is good at distilling? Ian Sturzman at MGP, or whoever's before him, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Or Seagram's. I mean, you know, you're talking old history. That's like the Bronfman family, like Seagram's, now MGP, Ross Squibb, whatever, like Barton. You know, they've had different distillers, but have you ever really had like terrible Barton if it's like 6, 7, 8 years old? I haven't.
Right.
You know, it's like
right.
Jim Beam sells so much whiskey, probably because their bourbon's pretty good.
Yep.
9-year Knob Creek's like what, like $30-$35?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nuts. And then you got like the big guys, you know, if you can get in with any of these big guys and find the good barrels, you know, you can make a craft product. But it brings up like, well, Wild Turkey's 6 to 8 year 101 is $20.
Yeah.
I can't sell 6 to 8 year for $20.
Right.
But I can strive to make, like, if it's 8 year, it better be amazing. If it's single barrel, you know, there's some good craft producers that are, you know, I consider it lucky or blessed, like to have 8 years. Somebody sourcing, like if you wanted to jump in today, instead of doing the distillation route, you'd have to have a huge bankroll, and you'd have to have a list of people that know somebody who knows somebody. And how are you finding 6 year? That's probably a tough find right now. 5 year, you might find some 5 year. 4 years probably not too hard, but finding like 8 or having owned, you know, I bought it at 3 and held it for 5 years. Like, you never know. There's so much money that's in wholesale barrels that, like, we get offered random stuff that's just, like I said, you know, a friend of a friend of a friend. That's like, what? I wish we had $500,000 right now, you know?
Right.
But just getting into the game, it's like, the dialing in is really what makes the difference. You know, if you buy 100 barrels and you can make 80 of them taste good within a year or 2 years, instead of waiting, you know, 100 barrels to get to, some barrels don't taste good until 10. You know, the barrel just wasn't sweet, or maybe it didn't get hot ever, or who knows. But,
right.
You know, so for us, trying to layer in flavors by manipulation is, like you said, that French oak, I've fallen in love with that. Like Penelope does a good job with it. We're using those same French oak staves. And
okay.
So you're really just, if you can take a well-aged product, like for us, we're using 6 year, and you start adding in the vanilla stave that's low tannin, or the complexity stave that's got this like thick oil and spiciness to it. And then there's just this intense stave that's like dark fruit, smoke, oak presence, and mocha. It's like, you start getting these batches that have like the French oak it's cool. We're starting to see we're doing more tastings on it.
Yeah.
And people are like, yo, this like people that don't even like whiskey are like, this is cool. Like especially women that like wine because the tannin's so familiar.
Yeah.
But it's like we got cherry pie notes. You get these vanilla cream notes. It's like we still get them in some barrels. Like we were tasting barrels yesterday. We're like, man, this one tastes like French oak, but with that French oak every single time, and Makers has done a hell of a job with just independent stave, all the R&D they've done.
Right.
Their program has exploded just off of experimental oak stave finishing. It's super cool. So that's something we're definitely looking to do more of and dial in more. And because like the staves that we get and Penelope get, those are from Tonnellaria Redoux. Okay. You can get through independent stave. There's like a whole nother 15, 20 different profiles of toast. So you can get 4 from Redoux, and that is a lot of combinations and doing all the R&D. But it's just nerdy stuff.
But it's fun, dude. I mean, so you guys are getting into that a little bit, trying to see what different stuff does. Basically?
Yeah. So we've done it with our toasted small batch. Like if it needs, it all comes down to flavor, and so we stayed on here finished and toasted barrels. Mm-hmm. But sometimes we will use staves if we need to as well. Okay. Because if I have a red fruit stave that can really just impact the profile, why not use it? Or a creme brulee, marshmallow. I mean, I'm drooling. You know what I mean? Like, yeah. So you're telling me you can make creme brulee you can make me sugar all the time. It's like, yeah. They've toasted it. And then there's like double toast that's like honey butter and just rich and spicy. Like there's just all these cool flavors that the barrel, if time weren't a thing, but to get it done in 4 weeks, that stave punches some flavor in, and it doesn't fix everything. The barrels are still the end all be all, but the staves are a nice polish. Yeah.
And now those flavor profiles you're mentioning, those are as advertised by where you're getting the staves from. So it's like you pick and choose how you're going to put those combinations together, basically?
And then you kind of just make they call them like a fan or a stave profile. So if you do the Makers, like they'll show you, I think it's like 10 staves.
Yes, on that little spin, that's probably the fan,
Yeah. And so we basically just buy those staves loose. Okay. And so we figure out based off of every batch, if we're doing like a toasted, if it needs staves, like say you dump 10 toasted bourbons together and you're like, man, this is flat where it needs flavor. And it's like, but this stave, we have enough experience now. Like it starts with bottle soaks. You throw a little chunk in the bottle and 4 weeks later you taste it every week and it shows you the progression, almost to scale. So then we did it on like a one stave. We put it in a drum with like one barrel. Okay. And then once we saw how like some staves affected a barrel, then we were like, we'll do a couple 100 gallons, and we haven't done full vats yet, but like, we're willing to, because they're weird. Like you can definitely, we learned through the bottle stoke studies that like if you leave it in too long, you just get stale wood. Oh, okay. There's some people who have wood sitting in their bottles on shelves, which is like, it freaks me out personally. I'm like, well, I don't know. I'd be curious if open one after a year if it's got. Is it just like all you get is wood, or did it go neutral? Yeah, I don't know.
That's a good question. I don't know. I think I've tried like one brand that does that. I've tried it off the shelf like immediately. I've never let it set for like a super long time and saw what happened. But I think that's cool too, the little spirals you can buy at home and throw it in there. Yeah. But that'd be a fun experiment to try it like every week for a year and just see what happens, see how your notes change over time. Yeah, I think that's another, once again, I keep coming back to it, but it's just a great example of how you can really fine tune with all of the finishing processes, everything that sourcing has really opened up for people. I think it really makes it, at least for me, and I know for a lot of people listening, I'm a whiskey nerd, and I love to hear about that type of stuff, Yeah. Now, is that something for you that your love of whiskey kind of progressed as you guys got into bourbon, or how did that journey kind of go for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's, now it's kind of work. It's still the best, scenario for a living. But yeah, man, like, you toast your first bourbon. When we got those first barrels, the only toasted on the market that was limited. It wasn't even like, but the first people to really coin toasted was Michter's. Okay. You had that bourbon release. I think it was in like 2018 would have been the most recent. Yeah. And they had the toasted rye. So we're like, people, will you toast us some MGP? Sure. So we got 2 barrels from Kelvin, toasted some barrels, and man, that's good. Total Wine put it on limit 1. It was like, man, we made it. We're limit 1.
Yeah.
And like it sold out in a week on limit 1, like a whole barrel.
Jeez.
And so, yeah, these were the good old days, man, before, 3 years ago. But yeah, now it's like, all these staves, and to have this kind of experience and like access, and
yeah,
I'm whiskey spoiled, man. It's like there's bottles of like bottle soaks at the house. There's all the, I'm to the point where I'm like, I have hundreds of bottles of whiskey at my house, and it's like every time we go to someone's house for dinner, or for like if we're going over there for a party, we bring a bottle. Like it's just we're just trying to give away and like share with the right people, and just it's cool to have the access to it. But yeah, man, I started like most people. Get your first, you go to your first release and get your Blantons that somebody told you needed, or your E.H. Taylor, and you got all these taters, and next thing you know, you're buying Four Roses picks, you're buying Elijah Craig barrel proofs, Willets, you're buying barrel proof stuff, and you see like, whoa, BTAC is way cooler than Pappy. And so then for us, it was like, it kind of dinged one day. I was like, I'm trying to help my family sell these vodka, gin, and rums, but we have a license to own barrels. It's like, Dad, let's get a barrel collection, like buy, sell, trade whiskey, like,
Mm-hmm.
And so it went from like just a love of the bourbon and the bottles to like, let's make bourbon better, and so now it's, just like people that source, they have their palate, I guess, is somebody can drink with them, and they our palates agree. So we like to think our palate is good, and we're putting out good stuff. So yeah, man, it's all stemmed from passion. It's really fun to be where we are now.
Yeah, I bet you're really happy that you decided to go the bourbon route, given that you were a fan of it going in.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah, before I did bourbon, the other family business, which I got insurance licenses at 18, like knock doors, cold call, like you're getting told no and doors are getting slammed in your face. But sometimes you get some yeses, and like I made a living doing that, but this is a million times more fun. And like the stress level is like non-existent for this compared to that.
I bet.
Like our employees here, it's like, we're bottling at 10. I can't be there till 10:30. Okay. Like it's not like you're fired, it's so it's just such a cool, we're very, very grateful to have this way of life.
Yeah, it's a sweet environment to work in, for sure. So now moving forward with NULU, we talked about where you guys came from. What type of things do you have coming up? Or you mentioned you're experimenting with staves. Is there anything specifically that you're excited about, even if it's not anything huge?
Yeah, getting access to Kentucky bourbon.
Okay.
That's been really, really cool. And some of it's from some big name distilleries. And so having diversity of our portfolio is really, really cool. We own over a couple thousand barrels that we bought just reinvesting. So that was what's cool, is like we borrowed the PayPal money, and then those 20 barrels turned into now like 2,500. So it's really cool to have all these different flavors to play with. But at the same time, we're going to release Hazelbaker Bottled and Bond. It's probably going to be like a $60 price point. So Bottled and Bond, it's at least 4 years old, 100 proof every time, and it's going to be the same distillate. It has to be, right? Because it has to be the same season. But what's cool with our inventory is one batch might be this distillery, this age. The next batch might be older, different distillery, might be the same distillery, different run. So we'll uphold the law, but it's cool that we can do weeded, we can do high rye, we can do, Kentucky high corn, high malt, or low rye, low barley. So we have all these different capabilities to where like it ingrains our family name more in the industry, but at the same time, it's like, hey, like $60, if you spend $60 on the Hazelbaker Bottle and Bond, it's going to be banging. So like we want to consistently put out like we know that's not a value price, but $60 for something that drinks rounded, drinks oily, drinks good, I think there's plenty of people out there that are willing to jump in that price point, and hopefully it'll surprise people,
Yeah. So then I guess diversifying is really where you guys are headed, especially with your inventory.
Yeah.
You're diversifying. We're going to see some new flavors come out.
Yep.
When's the Hazelbaker Bottled and Bond coming out?
We're hoping for Q1 of this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So soon. We got renderings. My brother, again, he's attorney, labels.
He handles the scary stuff, the labeling,
computer stuff. But that's what he's whipped up.
Nice.
Yeah,
All right.
That's the start. It'll probably have like a bottom thing, and then like maybe a neck strap or a foil. It definitely won't be wax.
Okay.
I was explaining to my dad, I'm like, you see how we have 8 people here, and we have an automated bottling line. Like you load in glass, and it comes out with neck tape full labeled with the writing on it, because we print that now, like you see here.
Yes.
But then you have to wax it by hand and sticker it by hand.
Oh.
I was telling him, like, that takes 8 people. If we had 3 people and no wax, we could have the same success. And he's like, what? Like, 3 people? I'm like, yeah, but we'll charge less, you know?
Right.
So the NULU will always be craft, premium, hand dipped. At this point, we have the time for it. You know, the automation saves so much time. But another thing we have coming is New Louisville Whiskey Company. So it's kind of like a more, you know, elegant, probably going to be in like that pappy shaped bottle, or like the, you know, that similar bottle, but it's going to be probably older age statement, micro batches, or potentially everybody wants a single barrel. We're happy to sell you whiskey however you want. So I'm sure we'll sell picks of all the brands, but actually, yeah, the way Hazelbaker Bottled and Bond is coming about is Jamie Ferris, that owns Lincoln Road down in Mississippi. Mm-hmm. He picked a Kentucky bourbon, but he was like, I want it at 100 proof, and I want it to be a bottled and bond. I was like, well, we could make NULU Bottled and Bond, and they were like, why don't you make something different? I was like, we've been talking about making a different brand, and he and then the distributor, Zach, from Mad Vines, they're like, man, just call it Hazelbaker Bottled and Bond. They're like, yeah, man, your last name's fine. Like, all right, cool.
Dude.
So, yeah, so we already have a barrel of it sold, and you know, so I think, but like I said, I'm excited to like kind of blend the different distilleries and make bottled and bond batches and stuff.
That's gonna be super cool. Is that gonna be distributed basically everywhere NULU is, or how's that gonna work?
It'll probably be lower supply at first.
Harder to get.
Yeah, we don't have a ton of Kentucky, and we're definitely selling at a lower price. But you know, there's water in it, of course. Like, I've told my dad, I'm like, we can justify selling a portion of our portfolio at a lower price at 100 proof, just because it's like, you know, we've been so blessed to sell all this so quickly. So now it's like we should make something every day that's, you know, we might not be making as much money on it, but it's not waxed, and, you know, give and take, right? So that's kind of what we're trying to do, especially with the way the market and the economy are, you know, so hopefully the economy comes back. Everyone can, the groceries get less expensive again, and, you know, but for the meantime, we'll try to do the best we can and get as low as we can on the shelf. Nice.
That's going to be super cool. I'm going to have to grab a bottle of that. I'm excited to see
we'll definitely send some up to Ohio if they'll have it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. They've been doing a good job curating stuff up there lately.
You all like your bourbon, man. I have no clue. We love Ohio.
Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
It's so huge, especially just over. I mean, I started hunting kind of late, and since I've started, it's just gotten out of hand big in Ohio. So
yeah, when people like, you see people kind of fall out of the hobby, or they're like, I'm sick of it, I can't find what I want, or you know, and that's like 1/10 of the amount of people that are getting into the hobby every day.
Big time.
There's so many people just like, they just tried their Weller, they just tried, or hopefully there's somebody behind a bar that's like, hey, here's Russell's 10-year, you can find this, it's banging. Here's Russell's barrel picks, they're $80 to $100. Now they're $100. They used to be 80.
Yeah,
everything's going up, but like, you know, for $100 or less, you can get some crazy good whiskey. I mean, like 8, 9, 10-year barrel picks from some of these distilleries.
Yeah.
It's cool. It's a good time to be a whiskey drinker.
It very much. It's an exciting time to be a whiskey drinker for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stills starting to fire up too.
There are
big stills.
Yeah. Do you see? And I can cut this out if you don't want me to say. But do you see that in your guys' future at all? Getting some distillate and
like a big still?
Yeah.
No. My dad kind of wants to, but personally, I think the people that are already built. It's like we're in the industry enough to where I think we could get what we want, which is lower price, entry price, to have the option to do $20, $30 bottlings for people.
Right.
So we'll see. It's kind of like we go back and forth on it as a family.
I bet. Yeah.
I vote no, because I'm like, those, you got to think, if you're making a few hundred barrels a day, that's like 3 shifts of how many people? 3 8-hour shifts. You know, you're running 24/7.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a lot of logistics, a lot of, you know, like think Jim Beam, they're laying down about like 4,500 barrels a day now after that expansion. Once that's complete, that's like almost 18 trailers of oak, just of fucking barrels a day. 18 trailers. It's like, think about the grain they're getting, and like it's that's nuts. Why am I going to go
Yeah.
build a still that makes 10 barrels a day or even 100 a day when Jim Beam's making 4,500 a day?
Yeah.
Heaven Hill's supposed to be expanding to like 2,500 a day.
Oh my gosh.
You know, who knows how many Buffalo Trace are distilling? Who knows how many Barton are distilling? Willet, I think, is over 100 a day now. It's like people who are distilling are Bardstown. Bardstown's doubled their capacity like twice.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
and then you got Greener. Like, there's plenty of big stills running, and there's plenty of whiskey from those stills that I would love to buy and play with before we even built a still.
Yeah.
Because my whole argument was like, Dad, like, what if we go spend these millions of dollars in this hypothetical that we don't have right now and get the still, get all these teams of people, and we distill, and in 8 years it sucks. I'm going to be so pissed because we could have bought MGP. We could have bought Barton, or if we had I wish we could say we could have bought Barton, but
Right.
you know, getting access to some of this stuff, it's like, you know, at least MGP, like, we know we can access that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we've gotten offered Bardstown and some other places for new makes. So
Okay. Very cool.
yeah.
Now, how's that work? You put your name on it as it's new make, and then you buy it right away, or
Yeah, you can buy barrels at zero, and you know, like, we have barrels at MGP that are anywhere from like 2 to 6, 7 years old. Like,
Okay.
so you can buy barrels at the distillery, and you have like a storage agreement, and
Okay.
they charge you for various services and all. But yeah, you
I
just pay storage and fees, and yeah, you can just because we're limited on space here.
Right.
The reason that limits us is because we're not wholesaling in any of our inventory. We're trying to make it taste good and sell it to consumers.
Right.
Whereas some people are just invested. They don't have a distillery. They own 100,000 barrels because they're rich as fuck. And the market's taking a correction, and they're like, what the fuck do we do? And like, they're leveraged.
Oh.
They have like borrowed money on their inventory that was bought as an investment. Like the money industry got into bourbon, before we did,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
there's a lot of layers to all that. So
Yeah, it's a lot of logistics. I think. I'm glad I don't have to worry about it. I just drink it and give my opinion.
Thank you.
yeah. Hey, but thank you for letting me use this awesome backdrop and talk about all this. I mean, this has been super cool.
Yeah, man. Thank you for coming.
Of course. Very cool experience here. I love the vibe of the place. I like checking it out. Of course, walking back into the warehouse area and smelling it, and that's a great smell when you walk into any of those types of areas. So.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for breaking all this down for me. And I'm looking forward to seeing that Bottled and Bond. I'm gonna check that out when it comes out, and definitely be trying it and giving my opinion. So.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. Cool. Thanks, man.
Cheers, brother.
Cheers. Thank you guys for listening to another episode of Whiskey Noobs. If you need more Whiskey Noobs content in your life, make sure you check out our Patreon page in the show notes. And if you like the show, please make sure to leave a 5-star rating or review. It only takes a couple of minutes, and they're way more helpful than people realize. If you want to do tastings alongside the show, make sure you join the email list by sending an email to whiskeynoobspodcast@gmail.com with a subject line that says email list. You'll receive monthly emails with a list of the whiskeys that will be featured throughout the month so that you can buy them ahead of time. You can also find more Whiskey Noobs content on Instagram at @whiskey_noobs and on TikTok at Whiskey Noobs Podcast. Once again, thank you guys for listening. The Whiskey Noobs Podcast does not support underage or otherwise irresponsible consumption of alcohol.